We go. What if the very habits you thought kept your relationships safe, like keeping the peace or putting others first, were actually keeping you stuck? In this powerful episode, psychotherapist and codependency expert Michelle Farris joins us to talk about healing the patterns that sabotage our self worth and learning how to build relationships rooted in trust, mutual respect, and authenticity. Welcome to the Happiness on Tap podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and practical insights for a happier, more fulfilling life. Your go to podcast for uplifting conversations that stir the heart and ignite the spirit. I'm your host, Leann, and today we have a very special guest, Michelle Farris. Michelle is a psychotherapist, writer, teacher, and friend in recovery. She's helped thousands of people break free from codependency, manage anger in healthy ways, and most importantly, learn to trust themselves again. If you have ever felt stuck in a relationship that drains you, unsure where you end and someone else begins, this conversation is for you. Michelle brings clarity, compassion, and real life tools that help us move from relationships that don't work into ones that truly serve us, starting with the one we have with ourselves. Let's welcome Michelle to the show. Michelle, I am so excited to have you joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much, Leann. I've been really looking forward to this too.
I have as well. It felt like it wasn't going to get here. So let's get started. Michelle, for those new to your work, how do you
Mhm,
define codependency in simple terms, and why is it
mhm.
such a common struggle?
So I like to define codependency, and you're right, it is not a simple term, but I'm going to make it simple because there's so many different definitions out there. It's basically a relationship pattern where you hyper focus on others in hopes of getting the love and approval that you can't give to yourself. So our whole focus is on them and what they will give to us because we don't feel whole within ourselves. And it's super common because so many of us have grown up in dysfunctional families where our needs weren't met, our thoughts and feelings weren't validated. So we learned self-doubt, we learned people pleasing and focusing on others to avoid abuse and to avoid being yelled at. And so it's really common, but what's interesting is some people don't recognize it in themselves because they don't see themselves in the main traits. But codependency has so many different areas that can affect you. It's really helpful to keep an open mind to see which ones may apply so that you can heal.
Yeah, absolutely. I am one of those people, definitely grew up in that type of household. So, what are
Me
some of
too.
the sneaky signs of codependency behavior that people may not recognize in themselves?
So, one of the things is often people who are codependent are really multi-talented because they're overachievers and they've accomplished a lot, but they can't acknowledge their own worth. They can't say, yeah, you know what? I did get that degree and I do deserve a, good job. It's very, very difficult for them to accept a compliment, to receive in any way. It's the power position for the codependent person is giving because that's where we feel high. That's where we feel like, oh, I'm being asked for help. I'm needed. And that fuels our self-worth versus what if you need help? Like, are you able to call somebody and say, hey, can you listen to me or can you help me move? Or is it, nope, I can't ask for any help because that's not allowed. That's being selfish or self-centered. So those are some kind of unique ways of codependent symptoms that people may not realize. The other one is that there's really two types of codependent people. There's the people pleaser, right? That most people know about. This is the person who says yes to anything. I'll be there in a heartbeat. I will neglect myself for you. And on the outside, they look super nice. And they are. They're big-hearted people. Now, years ago, I went to church with a woman and I realized, oh, there's another type. And this type is more the person who is very direct, very controlling. They have no qualms telling you what to do, how to do it, but they also get their worth in what they do and not who they are. So there can be a different type of codependent person that tends to be more controlling and more, oh, sure, I'll tell you what to do. I have no problem telling you what to do because I think I have all the answers. Because that's again how they learned to get value is to be the authority versus being the imperfect person that doesn't have to have all the answers.
Huh. Thank you
Yeah,
for saying that, because I guess I wouldn't have associated the two as both
yeah,
being codependent. And as soon as you started to talk about it, in my head, I could recognize specific people who are the controllers versus,
yeah.
my group of women friends who are all definitely the people pleasers who don't know how to
Yes.
say no, who are always
Yes.
there in a heartbeat. And learning how to change those behaviors is a
Hmm.
very hard road
Yeah.
to go through. Because again, like you said, it's the guilt, or you're being selfish, or you
Hmm.
should always
Hmm.
just be taking care of everybody else and never taking care of yourself, that you don't know how to do it. And I was that person.
Right.
That's why I have really looked forward to this conversation, to get your knowledge, your experience, your tips and suggestions for those of us who still struggle with those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the good news is, it really is about just making the shift from hyper focusing on others to including yourself. It doesn't mean a lot of people who, are considering codependency recovery, they think, well, I don't want to stop giving. You don't have to. I would never have started codependency recovery if I had to stop that part of my personality because giving is what I love. But what I had to do is be willing to put myself in the equation too, because what most people don't realize is if you can give less to others and more to yourself, your relationships are going to be healthier. They're going to be happier with you because you're going to be less resentful. So it actually is going to work better for other people and yourself if you can create more of a balance of give and take.
Yeah, I will agree with that. And learning how to say, have boundaries without
Yeah.
guilt, and be able to say,
Yep.
I have got to take care of myself too in this. Uh,
Right.
and learning, like you said, very specifically, learning that when we start to take care of ourselves in the equation, then we are our best self. And then we can continue to be the giver, be the caregiver, um, because we're operating from a full cup, versus operating from a
Right.
cup that's nothing but grounds. And yeah, I definitely had, prior relationships that ended in resentment because I didn't
Oh,
know
yeah.
how to speak up for myself. I didn't know how to take care of myself. And so I
Right.
just kept giving until I was completely empty. So thank you for going into that.
Hmm.
One thing we definitely talk about in codependency is people pleasing as a survival strategy. I
Hmm.
did it.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah.
can you share where that starts and how it becomes a pattern?
Sure. So in childhood, if we don't get our needs met, and really what most people don't realize is, a healthy childhood means that you get your needs met. The focus is on you. The parent gives to you. It's not a mutual, the child's going to take care of the parent's going to take care of the child. No, it goes one way, which is why it's so hard for most parents to do that, because if they weren't taught healthy parenting, where really the energy needs to go towards your child, not asking them to fill you up, it gets really confusing for the child. So And again, in these families where we don't get our needs met, we have to find a way to get our value. We have to find ways to get acknowledgement because kids absolutely need that. And one way to do that is to please others. So if you know that you have someone in your family that's really mad, you catch on real quick. You know what? I'm going to not say or do something upsetting because then I can avoid the wrath. Or maybe I get them a cup of coffee. Maybe I start cooking them a little bit, even at 12 years old. Maybe you give them a bagel or something, something where you realize, ooh, they're off my back. So the people pleasing starts as a way to protect yourself from abuse, but it also gives you a way to matter. And the problem is if that's the only tool a child has to matter, then they're going to grow up thinking their value is about what they give and what they do versus who they are as people. Because again, a parent needs to say to the child, you are worthy, you are lovable. I love the way you are such a great artist and so generous or so great with details. You're very analytic. Like we praise the child for qualities that are inherent to them versus what they do for us, because then they learn self-esteem is based on doing, which isn't healthy.
Yeah. And that was definitely my experience with childhood was,
Yeah.
knowing that if I made sure and did all the right things, made sure the house was clean when my mom got home,
Hmm.
make sure dinner was
Yeah.
started, the laundry was done, that
Mm.
there was less risk of her exploding, reacting,
Yeah.
hitting, whatever. But
Oh,
then
excuse me.
also in that is this learned behavior of being seen and not heard. Of course, that was a directive growing up
Yes.
in my house. So if I came home from school and my mom had company in the house and I wasn't aware,
Hmm.
say maybe a neighbor walked over or whatever, and they were in the kitchen having coffee, and I walked in and said, hi, I'm home, without
Hmm.
realizing that there was another person in the house, then I had misspoke and I wasn't
Mm.
supposed to be speaking out of turn. So I learned different behaviors and I learned to be careful, like walking in the house, like don't say hi,
Yeah.
I'm home, look around, see who's there
Mm.
before you
Hmm.
speak, or acting so like the good child so that then my
Hmm.
mother received that validation from her friends. Oh, you have such a good child. She's so well behaved.
Mm. Yeah. Because you're
So,
quiet.
yes, there was a lot of those layers growing up
Yeah.
that were really hard, like you said, to receive compliments because I didn't know how to receive
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
compliment. I didn't know how to have a partner who would thank me for doing the dishes and appreciate
Mm.
what I
Hmm.
was doing versus it
Right.
being an expectation or doing things to keep me safe.
Right. And it's funny because people would think, well, why wouldn't you want to receive a compliment? It's a form of love. But if you're not used to it and you're used to very indirect forms of love, or love becomes painful, right? Then it's really going to feel threatening when somebody actually gives it to you in a direct way because we don't know how to receive it.
Yeah. Yeah. That one
Yeah.
took some time.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I had one friend really hammer me. I said something really mean to myself once, and this guy in recovery said, you know what? Stop doing that. You're treating yourself like crap. And it was like a slap in the face. Like, oh my God, you're right. I am. But somebody else had to notice it for me to notice it. Because
Yeah.
sometimes we don't realize what our negative self-talk is. And in codependency, we have a lot of I'm not enough, I'm too sensitive. Messages from our childhood end up forming those messages that we just continue to tell ourselves, which ends up keeping us in codependent patterns.
Mhm. The other thing I did a lot of, which has taken time to break the habit, is starting a conversation with an apology.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
The
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. Hmm.
Yep, I'm sorry I didn't. I'm sorry I,
Yep. Yep.
and yeah, it's taken my husband some time to work with me on breaking those habits because
Yeah.
they are,
Good for you for breaking them though.
50-year ingrained habits.
Yep.
are
Yep.
hard to
One
break.
step at a time. Uh-huh.
What role does self-trust play in
Mm.
recovering from codependency? And how do we start rebuilding it after years of self-abandonment?
So, self-trust is so key. And this is what, for me, was missing in my recovery for several long years until a friend broke up with me quite suddenly and it devastated me. And I realized that I really didn't trust myself enough and have a strong enough sense of self to really do that until that friendship ended. Like I had some self-esteem, I had some intuition, but like it was really tested. And part of why that happens is again, as kids, right? If we don't get our thoughts and feelings and perceptions validated, especially around what's happening in our family, we assume that we're wrong. So when we have an intuitive hit about something, we just say, oh, no, we just dismiss it. We don't really learn how to trust it. And so in codependency recovery, sometimes what people will do is they will get into recovery in hopes of fixing the relationship when they don't realize that they actually need to fix themselves too. And by fixing themselves, their relationships are automatically going to get better. So, one way to do that is to simply start trusting your feelings. Like, notice what is happening. Like, if you get, for me, I call it a, like if something happens and I just feel like that little hesitation, I go with it and go, what is that about? I might do some writing. I might write and say, this is silly. I shouldn't be reacting when you're starting out. It might sound like that. But if you keep writing, you might write, you know what, that person doesn't feel safe to me. Or I really said yes to this, but I really don't want to do it. And here's why. And that's where writing can be super helpful because we want the practices to cultivate that sense of your intuition, those feelings, thoughts, and perceptions that we have ignored for years and look to other people to define us versus, when things happen to us, because they happen every day, you're going to have emotional reactions to that every day. Start tuning into that because I tell you, every time I do, they're right. They're absolutely right. And sometimes we have to learn by not listening to it. Like, okay, I'm just going to do this anyway. And then afterwards, you realize, you know what? I was completely right. I didn't have enough time to do that. It really messed with my schedule and I regret doing it. But that's okay because that's how we learn.
Mhm.
So I don't want to give the idea that, you have to do it right the first time. No, learn from your mistakes. Your mistakes are going to be your greatest teachers.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We are definitely, our life is our greatest teacher. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, that's another great tip is to really go within and question why we feel that way.
Yeah.
And, I'm very much like a mind mapper versus a writer.
Mm.
And that's, a part of my childhood that was taken away from me was the ability to
Mm.
journal and write and keep a
Mm,
diary or
right.
anything like that. There was so much distrust in the house that the
Mm,
fear of me writing down what was going on within our walls and sharing it with a
uh-huh.
friend was not going to happen. So
Hmm.
for me, journaling is very difficult. I can type till the cows
Hmm.
come home, which I can at least get it out. But when I'm
Hmm.
trying to go inside and think about all those feelings as they're coming up, for me, I can do it more like a mind map. Take
Yeah,
take
that's
the,
great that
the
you
main
have adapted
feeling
that.
and
Hmm.
kind of go around like, where is this coming from? Why do I feel this way? Why,
Yeah,
and it's helpful.
yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that as well. Um, can you talk about boundaries, how boundaries are different from walls and why they're
Hmm.
essential for mutual respectful relationships?
Sure. So walls are when we completely cut people off. And we might think that's a boundary because we're not participating. We are completely shielding ourselves from someone else's behavior, from being with them, from committing to them. The problem is that yes, that is somewhat of a limit, right? You are protecting yourself, but you're also not connected. You don't really have much of a relationship if you're building walls, because the whole focus is to insulate yourself from others versus trying to build healthy connections. So, the easiest way to start your boundaries is to think about, what are your values? What are the things that are really important to you? Like for me, when I was getting married, one of my biggest values was personal growth. I was not willing to have anyone as my partner who didn't do personal growth. And that weeded out a lot of men, a lot of men. But that was okay, because I knew that there was no way I could build a relationship with someone who didn't have that value, because it was such a big one of mine. So when you think of your values, like respect, like I wouldn't say being on time, because that's more of a preference. Uh, Respect is a big one. Personal growth. Maybe you want to have kids, maybe you don't want to have kids. What are those values? Because that's where you can go in and say, you know what, this is what I need, and this is what I'm going to do. Because the other thing is, even if you're with someone, you can't make them adhere to your boundary. The boundary, for it to work, has to be something that you can control, not something that's going to change their behavior. So, for instance, your partner's yelling at you. You can say, "Can you please not yell at me?" You could, but they have the right to say no, right? And if they have no self-control and no willingness to do anything different, they're not going to do that. So the boundary has to be followed up with a plan B, what I call, is, now what's your choice? They're going to continue doing that behavior. You can either stay and participate in it and feel like a victim, which we all do, right? We feel held captive, or we can choose something different. Maybe I leave the room and vote with my feet. That sends such a strong message. And so many people from my YouTube channel comment, "Oh, I'm stuck in a relationship. I can't do anything about it." But they can leave the room, because that sends a huge message to your partner or whoever you're with that's being mean or abusive or disrespectful, that you're not going to stay and participate in it. So that's where boundaries can be super simple. And it doesn't have to be, about what the other person's doing. It's about how you're going to take care of yourself around their behavior.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the values list and using it for your relationship choices.
Mhm.
I did that as well after coming out of a 20-year marriage. I
Mm,
spent 3 years of just learning how to love myself
mm,
first,
mhm,
and
mhm.
then really looking at that value list with regards to what kind of person I wanted to share my life with, wanted in my life, what
Yeah.
I was going to allow and not allow, and personal growth and those kind of things were definitely up at the top of my list.
Mhm.
And even like you said, do you want kids? Do you not want kids?
Right.
Um, I went as far as, I'm roots and I'm not wings. Like, I love it here. I've lived my whole life here. I don't want to move. Um, just
Yeah.
set boundaries, set values. And these are the things that I was solid about. And the funny thing was, because, we were older in our relationship, just shy of 50 for both of us. Uh,
Hmm.
that was one thing that we literally did on our second date, was we sat down together and put everything on the table, and
Mm,
talked about those things and what we were willing and not willing. And we prefaced it by saying, if we are not on the same page, if we do not have the same values and the same goals,
hmm.
we do not want to waste each other's time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is not fair. And that is, I think that comes with age and wisdom and growth and that kind of stuff, because I never thought about those things with my previous relationship, my previous marriage. It was 20 years. Or the
Hmm.
one before that when I was 17, because I think both of those relationships were based on the ability to get out of the unsafe space I was in,
Mm, uh-huh.
leaving that abusive house that I had grown up in. And that was my open door. to escape.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now in my 50s, I had my own place. I was set, and I didn't need someone to rescue me anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's so awesome.
So, yeah,
You rescued yourself.
I rescued myself. And I think that's a very powerful thing to be able to step into that after growing up
Yeah.
in a very codependent lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And,
Mm.
walls and boundaries, I definitely had some experience with the difference between the two and understanding the difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to set boundaries with people, and when they would consistently overstep those boundaries, I knew that it was me allowing that to happen, for one, that I ended up setting up the wall and just ending
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the
Sure.
relationship because I just couldn't allow myself to continue to be the enabler or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was I was doing, because I was definitely in control of my choices.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point that sometimes in recovery, we realize that some relationships aren't going to last because they can't tolerate our boundaries. Because often that is the turning point, right? If they don't really understand that we need to take care of ourselves, then we really have a decision to make on how close we want that person to be for us.
I think I watched, and I know it was you, one of your YouTube episodes where you talked about kind of this, what we're talking about, where relationships end because you have now
Hmm.
changed. You are now taking care of yourself. You're no longer that
Yeah.
person for them.
Right. Right.
And I had a 10-year friendship that, like you said, ended
Mm,
on the
mm,
spot. Like I didn't even see it coming. First, we were making
hmm.
plans, and the next day, I was this
Ugh,
horrible person because I had
I feel
changed
you.
so much in my divorce that I
Mm,
was no longer the same person that she needed me to be in our relationship,
uh-huh.
because I was now taking care of myself physically. I just a lot of changes. So,
Hmm.
listening to your episode really helped me kind of come to terms instead of floundering around going, what happened? For 10 years, I've been questioning, what
Yeah.
did I do?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I
Right.
want to, just give you a little shout out and say thank you for kind of
Oh,
opening my own eyes to, okay, this needed to happen.
sometimes that happens. Yeah.
It happened for a reason.
Yeah.
And it happened because I was healing and getting healthy and changing my life in positive
Hmm.
ways. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and sometimes, those relationships that die out in recovery are so full of valuable lessons, even though when we're going through it, it feels terrible. I mean, I was in huge grief for a long time, but ironically, my best content came out of that breakup. Like my blog, my biggest blog, 10 ways to let go of someone you love. It's like, and literally, I talked and shared so much about that experience, and people resonated with it because, yeah, sometimes relationships end, and female friendship is tight. So, it is, I don't think it's talked enough about where the grieving process is just super intense, and we need to kind of realize it's not our fault, but sometimes it does happen in recovery.
yeah. And I had another lady, probably a year plus ago, that I had on my podcast that actually walked me through that grief part of it.
Yeah,
The
good.
grieving, the what I
Hmm.
thought it was, what
Yep.
I wanted it to be. And so, again, that
Yeah.
was just another beautiful nugget. And I take
Yeah.
every one of those with me as my learning tools, not only for
Hmm.
myself, but to help others. So they're all valuable lessons, that we can continue to share not only our stories, but stories of other people that we come in contact with, and how they have learned
Absolutely.
from those things and how
Hmm.
they have grown and healed, and that there is another, life on the other side. Because when you're in
Hmm.
it, you just don't see it And so sometimes sharing a personal
Yeah.
story or a story of a friend is more powerful than we realize.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
this one I know what it is, but how does healing codependency impact the way we choose partners, friends, and
Mm,
even our
yeah.
professional relationships?
So for me, the turning point after that friendship ended was so huge because I now had to fill myself up. So in that grieving process, I literally said, okay, I cannot make other people my higher power anymore because that's what I was doing and I didn't realize it. So that's part of the growth is we have to build up our sense of self and befriend ourselves enough that we feel solid enough to make different choices. Because before I did that, I grabbed anybody who could be my friend. Now, granted, there was some criteria, right? They had to be respectful, they had to be in recovery or doing the work or something. They were, they were still good people, but I didn't pay attention to the red flags. I didn't pay attention to when they said things like, well, I don't really like in-depth friendships. What? Like that was not who I was. So it's like that's what the growth is about, is to just really look at, are you really compatible? And if not, can we be honest? And the way we pick people is so much out of our own neediness. So if we can fill ourselves up and feel good enough about ourselves, then we're going to pick from a different place versus that desperate, I'm alone, I don't have anyone. And that's honestly why I always recommend 12-step programs like Al-Anon or Coda or some form of extra support. Because if you don't have any connection or any support in your life and you get into a relationship, it's going to be really hard not to put all of your emotional eggs in their basket. And that's going to set it up to fail. Versus if you have your support system, if you have your friendships, if you have hobbies, if you have things that make you purposeful in life, then you have your partner, then you have your primary relationship. It's going to be different because your needs are going to be spread out evenly and you're going to be able to meet them yourself, not just everybody outside of you.
Yep. Yep. I have that, with my husband that I had never had before because I was so used to having to run straight home after work to take care of the kids and to cook the meal and to make sure
Hmm.
the house was clean and, take care of everybody else. And then, my relationship now, there's this push for me to have my own life. Go be with your friends. Go do this. Go. You want to go
Yeah.
attend this,
Yeah. That's awesome.
and I don't feel guilty about saying, hey, I got invited to attend a somatic breathwork event on Sunday, in the middle
Yeah.
of our normal Sunday day and feel bad about saying I need this for myself
Right.
instead of, oh, I'm not going to go because Sundays are couple day or whatever, we only get
Yeah.
so many of those days. No, he pushes that I do what I need and fill myself up.
Yeah.
And so
That's so great.
it is a big change from what I was used to, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and you avoid that unhealthy dependency by doing that because he's not your only source, which
Mhm.
is wonderful.
And I even try to do the same for him, like, please go and schedule things. He's got a twin brother.
Yeah.
So go
Oh,
see a concert with your brother. Go, I don't eat fish. So I always tell him, make plans to go have sushi or fish with all your
yeah.
fish eating friends. Please
Yep.
don't feel
Yep.
like you can't enjoy those things because I don't like them,
Right.
you know.
Exactly.
So we have that balance, and that is
Hmm.
so wonderful that neither of us have guilt in that balance. And but
Mm.
that when we're together, we love all of our time together.
Oh, that's so great.
So
Mm.
you have created several courses and resources around your work. Can you share a bit about what's available and how people can get started?
Sure. So I have some ebooks, mostly on codependency and managing emotions. Gosh, I've been starting to get into doing live workshops, which have been really fun. So I have one on boundaries, I have one on resentment that I just did, and I have one on anger. I also am going to probably be doing a beyond codependency class where you can either do the self-study or the live version with more support, probably coming up in August, September. But a lot of my courses are just super easy. They're videos, they're journal prompts. I want to always give them the feeling that I'm right there with you. Because to me, like I could read a book, I could do journal prompts, but I like that video aspect to stay connected and to hear somebody's story, because that to me is what helps me grow. So that's why most of my courses and ebooks include some videos.
Great. Yeah, I really enjoy your videos. When they pop up and I get that notification, I kind of stop what I'm doing. You keep them at a nice
Oh,
short amount of time that I can catch
yeah.
it
Yeah. It's not
and
long.
yeah, it's really wonderful. And I think that was part of my draw for podcasting and even listening to
Mm,
podcasts. It's that personal connection. I get to see somebody
yes.
face, hear their voice, hear their story. I feel connected to them in a not in a
Hmm.
creepy way, but in a empowering
Yeah. Yeah.
way. And I love
Absolutely.
books, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
After a while, I find myself dozing off and losing quick interest in the book. But with a podcast, even if it's like, say, a 2 hour podcast,
Yep.
favorite person,
Yeah.
I can listen to it in pieces and get excited knowing that I still have more to listen to later, or
Yep.
tomorrow, or whatever. So, yeah, I really enjoy that kind of stuff as well. And I did all my education online, so that was something that
Oh.
was easier for me to do instead of sitting in a classroom, being
Hmm.
tired, feeling bored. So thankfully, we have this wonderful ability to have education
Yeah.
online and learn so much. Two last
So
quick
good.
questions. What is
Mhm.
one message or practice you wish every woman could embrace when she realizes that she's lost herself in a relationship?
That it's okay to do less and do a little bit for you. It's really okay. Most people in your life are going to love you anyway because they want you to take care of yourself. And we really have to remember that.
Yeah, we really do.
Yeah.
Um, I know you have a special gift that you want to share
Yes.
with my audience. So if you could
Mhm.
talk to that and then also let people know where they can find you.
Sure. So I have a little free guide called The 7 Steps for Healing One-Sided Relationships, the Codependent Solution. And I go over journal prompts, what is codependency, signs. I have some tips about boundaries, about detachment, because a lot of times when we get started, we need those practical tips to say, okay, how do I start? What do I do? What is a boundary? How do I start to detach and not freeze my partner out? Because sometimes people, don't know where to start. And then if they want to find me, my website is counselingrecovery.com. And my YouTube channel is, let's see, Relationships That Work with Michelle Farris. And my Instagram, I think, is Counseling Recovery.
Great. I will make sure to include all of that, the link to your wonderful free gift. Everything will be in the show notes. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your warmth, and your lived
Mhm.
experience. Your work is a powerful reminder that healing is possible and that we don't have to keep repeating the same patterns to feel loved. To all of you listening, if something stirred in you during this conversation, that your inner wisdom nudging you towards something healthier, more honest, and more whole. Be gentle with yourself. Take one step today towards trusting your own voice. You can find Michelle's courses and her amazing blog at counselingrecovery.com. Everything will be in the show notes. So thank you again, Michelle. I appreciate your time and thank you so much for being a wonderful guest.
Oh, thank you so much for being such a lovely host.
Oh, thank you.